How's it going? It's Sloan again. I was expecting to go on this epic journey and find a new place to settle down, but I went about, I don't know, like 2,000 blocks west of our old home, and I found this incredible bay over here. I mean, look at this place. Well, I've been doing my best not to take a little dunk because I don't want to freeze to death, but screw it. Over the past couple days, I've recruited a couple others to the cause here. We've got Cosmo, one of my neighbors from the last world, and I'm not sure they've built a lot besides infrastructure thus far, but we also have Voka, who I visited a couple of times last world. If I take you up the mountain here on our rickety little wood path, you may realize that I got a little bit carried away with the chisel. But we have a nice comfy little house now, and waiting for us inside it is some winter clothing. Thank you, Cosmo. I'm not sure if these clothes are going to be enough, though. It's -12 out in the middle of the day in November. I think it's going to get a little colder. We've got a fully featured kitchen here, and everything is functional, as you might have noticed when I was grabbing the winter clothes. The cabinet here actually holds some things because I'm using a Chisel Tools decorative storage vessel. We've got a hidden fire pit here atop the stove so that we can still cook things. And the stove itself is actually a decorative oven that can be filled just like a normal one. It's probably not very revolutionary if you have experience with Chisel Tools, but I still think it's pretty cool. Oh, I did lie about one thing. The sink doesn't actually do anything. I didn't think about the plumbing when I decided to live on the top of a mountain. It's kind of hard to get water all the way up here through a pipe. Now, I haven't forgotten what I said at the end of the last episode. We are going to get to that cabin and pretty it up so that I can put it up for sale on the housing market. But there is one project I'd like to work on first. Right here, we have this lower portion of the mountain. I have, in my inventory, 12 iron splitter plugs. If I were to hollow out a vertical 6x6 tunnel through the mountain, I could build a nice spiral staircase going all the way up. This would normally be an enormous project, but because of Stone Quarry, it actually shouldn't take that long. But when other people see it, they'll think it's impressive because it's big, even though it only took me like an hour. And that's what we're all about around here. We operate on vibes and we try to impress. I might need more inventory space for this. I'm pretty sure Voka set up some storage. It's so good having other people around to handle the chores for me. We really ought to get some better bags, but for now, we'll just have to make our way back down the mountain every once in a while. What our ultimate goal is here, and what Voka has coined the conflux, is I want to build in a mystical, magical sort of style. Normally, the color palette in Vintage Story is a little too restrictive for real high fantasy construction. There's color in this game, but it's mostly nature color. When it comes to actually expressing yourself artistically through pigments and stuff, there's really not a lot of options. But Bricklayers completely solves that problem, and we have access to pretty much every single color on the spectrum here. It's going to be a lot of grinding. We should be able to make it work, and that's what I meant by going outside my comfort zone. Because I've pretty much always built in that grounded, down-to-earth, real-life style in this game, and I really want to change it up. So for our staircase here, to add a little bit of flair, I've got a very specific example that not a lot of people are probably going to get. The Keru Forest Dungeon in the MMO Mabinogi has a glass floor for the majority of the dungeon where you can see these geometric stone shapes underneath, and I think if I built a spiral staircase up where the center is completely open, and you can just see down into that glass floor, I think it would be very eye-catching. The goal would basically be to add intrigue for the sake of people who decide to look around instead of just immediately taking the stairs. We're going to need a lot more lanterns. Now for my first trick. We'll make 215 stone blocks disappear. Okay, so my math was off. 199 is basically 215 if you squint. Now that I'm realizing this is going to be about 60 blocks tall, I'm wondering if someone could go back and tell Jonas to invent the elevator. day 5 of working on this staircase thing on and off. I think I have a bad habit of underestimating how long things are going to take me in this game. Which makes it that much worse that on top of my own project, I now have some paid construction to go do for someone else. So I'll go get a whole bunch of building supplies ready, and I'll meet you where we're doing our paid gig. We're almost to spawn. I've got a handful of miscellaneous materials ready to go, and the tools to do different things with them. But rather than explain what we'll be doing while I paddle away here, let's cut away to a visual aid I have prepared. So there's this park I built around this time last year in Minecraft. It's pretty small, and I did it almost entirely on vibes, but I'm still pretty happy with how it turned out. The main thing I want to bring over is the way it's completely blocked off from view. Otherwise, well, I'd still prefer to do something new than just do the exact same thing again. And this is the translocator that we were hired to build around. I guess since it's so close to spawn, the mods decided to bring it up to the surface, which is extra convenient because we don't actually have to build a way to get down to it. First things first, I'm going to need to flatten a little bit of this area, although our little park isn't going to be too big, so it shouldn't need a lot of space. I'm not actually a huge fan of flattening the ground out like this. I much prefer to build with the contours that the map gives me, which is a big part of why I do a lot of survival instead of creative in the first place. I feel like restriction breeds creativity, right? But in this case, it is a park and old people love their parks, so we can't have the elderly having to walk up and downhill. I think I do like the idea of this part being just up off the ground. I feel like if we put some raised flower beds up here, that would look great. I don't want to make it too big because this is just for a single translocator. I guess I can build with the road instead of moving it, though I kind of wanted to just dig it up and get it out of my way. I think we can put the entrance right here and it'll make the road look like it's an intentional part of our park. So here's our entryway, just marked off for later. So our wall should extend in this general direction, and I think end right here, so that we have just enough space for our raised flower beds. And right now I'm just sort of outlining the area so that we can figure out exactly how we want to do this. I was actually working on a video at one point, though I've shelved it for now, which kind of went over the basics of building, and I feel like one of the first things you should always do is just block out what you want to do. Put down the very, very basic shapes. You can't really figure out exactly how you want something to look until you see it, and just having the vaguest squint and you'll kinda get it impression of what you're building makes such a big difference when it comes to concepting. Yeah, I'm a fan of that. It's possible we didn't prepare quite enough dry stone, and by we, I mean I. But either way, I want to get the general idea of it all down before we move on. Our Minecraft park had a little gazebo going on, and I think I want to build something like that around the translocator. So what happens if I break this? I was really worried that thing was going to fall. I think we'll make it a little bit big so that it's hard to miss the translocator, and also so that there's some room for seating. You know, wait for your friends next to the eldritch ancient machine. It's comfy. I did pre-pick the color palette ahead of time, but I think I'm a fan of the oak logs for the corners. And I want to make some stripped logs here. Excuse me, debarked logs, wrong game. So my number one favorite thing about other parks I've done in block games is the pond. Every good park needs a water feature, and this one is going to be no exception. I think 2 blocks deep is probably sufficient. And what we're going to do here is we're going to engage in a little bit of texturing, which I'm not actually the biggest fan of normally, but when it comes to making more natural features, I mean, if you look at nature, look more than a foot apart. Does it look like you're seeing the same texture? Can you look at dirt or grass in real life and just see this without it being someone's perfectly manicured lawn? No, there's rocks and bugs and weird little weeds and stuff. There's so many layers to what you're looking at when you see a nature scene in real life. And while I can't capture all of that in this game, I like to at least do the bare minimum and add a bit of variety to the scene. We've got a few adjacent colors to work with here. But basically, just going through and scattering a few different blocks here and there does a lot to really break things up. The one thing I don't want to do is leave us with the normal default dirt texture in here, because I feel like if it was wet, that stuff would just turn straight to mud. Packed dirt at least gives the impression that it's already mud. What I think we're going to do is we're going to make the teensiest little channel here, and I'm going to make it so that the water is coming from this raised bit. Now, as far as those raised flower beds are concerned, I want to put them right up against the wall here, and I want them to be pretty big. Because they're flush with our wall, I want andesite to be involved in the construction, but I also want them to stand out a bit from it. We're going to actually, I think, use debarked poplar logs, and you see how this lower part is already a darker color? We are going to take our chisel, and we are going to just take that part out, just completely. We want the brighter color, we don't want the darker color. And instead, because we want to both incorporate andesite and make it stand out from our wall, we're going to make some polished andesite because it has a darker texture. And when we combine it with the edge of the planter we're making, we should have a pretty satisfactory result. Obviously, there needs to be more work done to get the shape down, but I think that's a pretty comfortable contrast that still sort of blends into the wall, but isn't quite the same. We want it to be distinct that this isn't just the wall magically jutting out in this direction. Once we have flowers, the strong contrast isn't quite as noteworthy because the flowers already contrast both of these colors quite strongly as it is. So we'll leave this for once we have a pantograph on hand. But what's left to do here? At pretty much every point in the park, we want the wall to extend 2 blocks up from the ground. And then we're going to top it with oak leaves. Then I'm going to find parts that feel a little bit empty, and we're going to make it look a little overgrown and have leaves hanging down from above. So what if I added a real basic pattern here? And brought the wood part in a bit where it connects to the andesite, so that we have a bit of a lip. I feel like I like how this looks a lot, but it needs some sort of block to break up the transition here. I need something that lies somewhere in between andesite and poplar. I'm not sure if that exists, but I'm going to look around a little bit. I think I found exactly what we needed. I think with this being so high up, I want to go back on what I already did over here and make these lupine flowers more prominent, because they're narrow and sparse, and that kind of goes with the height, like the wind is blowing through them. I don't want to make too complicated of an arch. I think making it still look blocky is good, because there's not a whole lot around here. I hate to say it, but I kind of like how the full blocks look there. They give it a bit more structure. I'm gonna just leave it like that. And the last thing I think we need is some sort of fencing for the gazebo. It's really hard to overstate just how much of my building is purely based on vibes. I have no pattern whatsoever in my head right here. I'm just kind of doing things I think look nice. I just kind of chip away until I see a shape I like, and if I like that, then I keep using it. And if I don't, I try it again. And an important rule of thumb anytime you're doing things with the pantograph is to break and replace a voxel in each of the blocks you pasted in order to fix the lighting. Sometimes it gets a little bit weird otherwise. Well, personally, I think I'm pretty satisfied. There's still a decent bit of empty space to this, but this is a group project with another member of the server, so I'll come back at a later point and see what they've added to it. I left her in charge of handling the lighting, so we'll see what she does for that. I think one last look from above with all the foliage swaying in the wind shows that it came out pretty nice. Then, over the next couple weeks, I realized just how long my alleged couple hours of staircase would take. Between grinding for materials and concepting an Aseprite in creative mode at the same time, I severely underestimated how long it would take. I kept chipping away bit by bit, but it was nothing too exciting for the camera, so let me just finally explain what my thought process was with what I've got. So, full disclosure, the entryway is still very incomplete. The others have been hard at work making this dreary little valley fishing town sort of thing, trapped between our two mountains. And I like the idea of everything getting more magical as you go higher up. So we've got what's going to hopefully be a relatively unassuming doorway with a touch of color to it as you come through here. And then we've got, from earlier, our Karu Forest Dungeon glass floor, leading up and up and up, all the way to the top of the mountain. As you might have seen, the actual concepting process to get a perfect circle like this took me a lot of time. I've decided to keep the walls themselves with the general color palette of the area below, but it fades into more and more of this magical, mystical rainbow. You know, happy pride, right? And it all leads up to here at the top of the mountain where I'm going to put some sort of cap on top of it all. And if you look straight down it, we've got this incredible spiral going all the way back down to ground level, which you can safely jump down, because when you hit the bottom, my magic feather spell keeps you safe. Trust me, it's magic. I didn't hide invisible ladders in these glass blocks. Definitely way more extra than I intended it to be, but it gave me an exercise in capturing the vibe of the entire settlement. I really like the idea of everything being more mundane toward ground level, and as you ascend, everything gets more magical, more colorful. And you'll see a lot more of that as I actually start to flesh things out and we don't just have a staircase that leads to nothing. Because right now this is a really, really big staircase for one teeny tiny little house. But actually fleshing things out is going to have to wait, because I got a real talk with you for just a moment. It's nothing bad, I promise. As an artist and a content creator and all other forms of creation I partake in, I always feel like I have to one-up myself. So doing episodic content like this has been a little bit weird for me, and I'm going to keep doing it. But with a game like this, there's a lot that's really, really, really boring to watch. I don't think I'm going to make a 15-hour tree cutting video. You know, this isn't Minecraft. Gathering the materials to do just all this really did take me a couple of weeks between actually working on building and working on necessities for the game, like getting backpacks, getting resources to make steel, and so on. It is a slower paced, more grindy kind of game. Now, I'm going on vacation for a few weeks, so I'm going to be a little less present than I have been. But yeah, I'll try and get something out shortly after I return from vacation. But until then, I will be absent, so I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the short episode, but we'll get a whole bunch more done together when I return. Goodbye.